Hey everyone, it's Devin Francis, also known as Dr. Blackard. Yep, and you're watching episode 184 of the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast. Moving on, getting it done. What are we talking about today, Victoria?
We're talking about the September and October OAC episodes.
Yes.
World of Whitonia and the other one.
Yep. Icky and Cat and Balty and Bones.
Yep, that
Bone.
title's way too long.
Yeah, I know. I don't know how precisely yet how I'm going to cut these titles down for the YouTube video title.
Have fun with that. I didn't even think of that.
I know. I always think of that when there's long titles. So, episode 870, yeah, we're cutting things down, like we said, trying to squeeze them in together so we can get caught up a little faster. Episode 870, The World of Whitonia, written by Phil Lawler. It's an interesting episode.
I can look at all the messages I sent you while I was listening.
What?
Did you read them?
I did, after I finished it, yeah. What happens in this episode, Victoria?
It's a mix of... It's a really, really weird mix of the story of Adam and Eve, but through Renee programming, like I don't know, her own little Animal Crossing world.
Uh-huh.
This episode predicted Animal Crossing because it's not like anyone knew who was coming. Filled with Barney and Tinkly Winkley or whatever her name is. With
Kyria and Andros.
Baby Bop and Barney. Who are voiced by Eugene and Connie. Because every time we do an Adam and Eve story, Adam and Eve have to be Eugene and Connie for some reason. And then we have our Professor Mongol type character who's just there to stir up chaos and might as well steal the Imagination Station plans while you're at it because no one's ever tried to do that before. And yeah, he basically destroys Renee's program by enlightening the dinosaur folk, and then they go to war. They go from planting gardens to going to war.
Yeah, they literally turn their plowshares into spears and their pruning hooks into pitchforks.
And in a very Imagination Station book-ness of them, it's like, I have an invention. They'll let you be virtually disguised outside of the Imagination Station in real life. And thank God Renee ends up breaking it. I would have too. I like to think she did it on purpose. If so,
she knew there was too much power for Whit to have.
In Odyssey, and the best character. Yeah, and then those little ungrateful dinosaurs can't be like fixed. So Whit murders all of them. The end.
He wipes their brain
also,
boxes.
Renee's Jesus. And God.
Yeah.
And I can only assume in the sequel episode we'll get next October or September, she'll become the Holy Spirit.
So, Renee has made her own, like, little Willy Wonka world here. Clearly, from the description, she was just out here programming the Imagination Station while on LSD, and Whit is just turning an irresponsibly blind eye to all of it.
She made, like, Munchkin dinosaurs.
She made...
like, dinosaurs with the Munchkin color palette, and I hate it.
It's like... It's weird because her creativity, for the most part, was just like, everything is the wrong color. And that's the extent of my creativity. And only in her creatures was she's like, give them, like, their arms split off and they have tails and 3 nostrils and whatnot. But still,
I like how
clearly very anthropomorphic.
Okay, can I just say, in World of Whitonia, and when Whit was just like, oh, there's residents, what I thought was going to happen, nay, what I prayed would happen, was Whit would go up into a village and he would see hundreds of NPCs who all look exactly like him. And then he would turn around and Renee would be gone. And then he would just hear a voice over the speaker saying, "Now you know what it feels like to live a day in my world, Mr. Whittaker." And then he would be trapped there.
I mean, if I was Whit, I would feel a touch weirded out that Renee named her world after me, especially when it's like this. I don't know.
This isn't the weirdest thing that's happened to Whit.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, if I made a
Nothing
world...
phases that man anymore.
If I made a world like this and I named it after you, wouldn't you think that was weird?
Okay, yeah, I would think that's weird.
Like, okay, so at what point did you realize that this was, like, the Garden of Eden and stuff, and Renee was going to, like, understand why God put the tree there and stuff?
Right when Renee started basically implying that she wanted to create, like, a will and stuff, and was having, like, she was like, I want them to have Will and Ryan, and then, and they do. He voices one of them. And then she's like, oh, and a control panel, which they can't touch. I was like, okay, yeah, that confirms.
Yeah, I figured it out
clearly.
About 60 seconds earlier. Probably, I guess earlier than that, because that's after they talked to them. It was like 3 minutes into the episode, as soon as Renee's like, yeah, I created these beings, but all they do is, like, name the plants and the animals. And I was like, okay. Got it. I think it was slightly before that line.
What a bunch of losers. Who likes naming things?
I'll give him this, like, when Whit talks about, like, oh, I know what we need to do, and he kind of, like, reboots the program in a way that causes them to notice the existence of the panel being there, which I guess they never really elaborated on whether or not that's what Whit was doing, but I would have to assume so. That's what Whit did when he's like, here, let me type on this, and then it reboots, and when it pops up, they're over there, and they're like, hey, what's that computer? That's what Whit was doing, because I thought, like, this is actually a really good way to illustrate through why the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was a necessary construct to facilitate humanity having free will and the ability to form a relationship with God, because relationship requires love, and love requires choice, and choice requires things to choose between, which required, some sort of thing that they can't do as opposed to that they can do, so that they can decide. And I thought that was
one thing I wrote was, Renee says, inherit the earth, my dinosaur children.
So...
Because she was just like, I want them to take it and prosper and yeah. I can't do her accent.
Everything is going good, and Whit, like, introduces, like, temptation to them, basically, by, like, letting them know that the comp link is in the pile of boulders. And they're like, we have curiosity now, but we're going to listen to Renee. And then Renee's like, I'm taking the portable imagination station to my computer teacher. And he's like, hey, my name is Dr. Astan, which is definitely not an obvious anagram of Satan. And
I didn't even pick up on what his name was, because I was doing things while I listened.
And they pointed out in the web quest that his last name was Lebernese or Libernus, which they pointed out backwards is Sin Rebel. And I was like, okay, that's a little over the top. That's a little heavy-handed.
I remember...
But the fact that he's like, my name is Dr. Satan Sin Rebel, and the fact that I'm coded as the devil and also have a vaguely West Asian, like, Middle Eastern accent, while everyone else in this episode is white, is definitely doesn't at all have racist overtones to it.
I mean, sometimes I'm pretty good at, like, picking up on anagrams, as long as I see the name, like, spelled out.
Yeah.
In front of me, more so than probably the average person, 100% because of Kingdom Hearts.
I was gonna say Lorium, pink hair.
But there's, like, one book I read in one of my English classes, where one of the antagonists, his name was, like, an anagram for, like, I think it was, like, Bible Christianity or something like that. And then I read, don't think I was done the book yet, but maybe I was. I don't remember. I brought it up in my class. My teacher was talking, and I was apparently the only person in my class who noticed that, other than my professor. And he was just like, hey, someone noticed the anagram name. And I was like, yeah, they did nothing with this in the plot. I thought it was going to have some sort of purpose. And he was just like, no, no, it's just there. I was like, yeah, it doesn't mean anything. It's just this character's name is an anagram, but there's no reason and there's no symbolic nature for it. And it really bothered me in that book because I hated reading that book. That's probably one of the worst
Was that
books I've ever read.
it wasn't Snowpiercer, it was Snow Chaser or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was that one. Snow Crash.
Yeah.
And I hated reading that book so much.
I remember.
I almost gave it 1 star on Goodreads, which I've never done before.
Yeah, I didn't.
And yeah, I was just so mad that I picked up on this bit of analytical stuff about this book I hated.
Yeah.
And that it had 0 payoff, and I hate that book so much.
I didn't think anything was going on with his last name because Libernus at least sounded like a real name to me, but his first name I couldn't quite make it out because Renee was rushing through it. But later when Andros called out his name and he was like, Astan, come back, and he said it so clearly, and immediately in my mind I was like, okay, yeah, that's a low ball. He's an anagram of Santa. That's what he's supposed to represent.
I remember all those sermons people would do on Gravity Falls while it was still coming out, and that one I
remember the one.
Yeah, the one I watched, and the preacher was just like, if you take this one main character's name, it's Stan. If you add a letter, it's Satan. And I was dying laughing.
So
I was like, that applies to literally everyone named Stan in the whole world.
So Aston comes in and he's in the guise, in the spirit of every writer in existence. He's like, boy, there sure are some nice pure OCs that you have over there. Sure would be a shame if some conflict were to happen to them. So he basically goes in and tries to create Westworld. It seems like he nearly could have, because it sounds like not only was he I'm gonna make you give you evilness and conflict and stuff, but it sounds like the apple of knowledge in this case wasn't the knowledge of good and evil, but it was the knowledge of them understanding their nature as being NPCs in a computer program, which makes sense, right?
Whit
because
another message I sent you is Whit telling Renee, your teacher is actually Satan, which was almost straight up a line.
I thought you figured out his name because you sent that to me, and I was like, oh, she figured out the anagram.
Very clearly that in the allegory.
Yeah, I know, but you said because you said that, I thought you figured out the name.
I didn't. I don't listen to character names. That's something you should learn about me by now. Eugene, Katrina, and Whit are the only non-evil teachers in the entirety of Odyssey that I can think of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, in the context of what the apple is in this case, that the knowledge being presented isn't the knowledge of good and evil, but it's specifically the knowledge of we know what we are now, because the thing that they gained was seeing the comp link and him explaining to them, presumably this controls your world because you're all in a simulation, everything is fake, which, like I said, then makes it even more so that he's trying to create Westworld in here by giving them all sentience and breaking them free of their patterns so they can overthrow Renee. And I guess Whit is Ford is,
So I guess the
Anthony
imagination
Hopkins.
station is hooked up to the Wi-Fi, so they unhooked it to the Wi-Fi, so it would be harder for them to steal. And then this little interaction, which I rewrote, happens. Renee says, my professor wants to steal the imagination station. Whit says, that's why I cut off the Wi-Fi. And Renee replies, he's an alpha gamer, Mr. Whitaker. He'll get in.
He's in. Time to hack.
Eugene comes in, he's like, I won't let you do this. He's like, oh, you insignificant little twink, I'm so far beyond the imagination station.
So, as you said earlier, Whit is like, I have something I've been working on. And I'm like, I'm sorry, Johnny Avery Whitaker. Are you implying that this device will let you look like something without having to interface with the program in the imagination station? Like it will project it inside of the station in your mind without having to connect to it because Astan is like controlling the program? Or are you saying that it will work outside of the imagination
See, I was
station?
thinking, oh, it's outside.
But I was like,
that's awful. And
surely
then
they
Renee,
wouldn't do that because that would be absurd.
yeah, and then they turned it on and was just like, hey, look. And I was like, oh, they mean it happens once you hook up to any electronic device. If you have an avatar, that's what your avatar looks like now. And then Renee was like, look at me, I'm sure. And I was just like, oh, good Lord, no. He means in real life.
Yeah, I was like, because the ladder, that if it makes it look like in real life, it shouldn't even work in the imagination station because you're not seeing your physical body in the station anyways, unless it's only working because you think it's going to work and it's working through your imagination and it's just like the placebo of it and all.
I think around this point I was just like, oh, I get it. It's all fake. Whit put Renee in another mind-breaking simulation.
Yeah, it's like
and
Isaac
that's why
the Chivalrous.
All this dumb stuff is happening. And her teacher, I actually thought it when her teacher like just straight up became the devil, basically, and snuck in. I was just like, surely this can't be
it's
real.
All part of the simulation.
And this is just a program.
A valid
that Whit
prediction,
because
and yet
he loves
incorrect.
to torture Renee. And then I was just like, no, it's probably real. And it was real.
Yeah, so Whit
has
just created a portable holographic disguise machine on apparently the level of fidelity of like Mission Impossible face masks, except it does your whole body and can give you extra limbs and everything. And
Renee's just screaming in agony as she gains another nostril hole, and she's like, this is the most painful
she comes out of it and she can't sleep for weeks because of the phantom pains of the extra limbs she has that don't actually exist and never did in her mind.
Oh, I hate this. Let's talk about something else.
I like the implication that the federal government would ever allow a game dev to take ownership of the technology for the imagination station. We all know what happened last time a corporation made a consumer product out of the station, and it was almost the end of the world.
You know what they say about history and repeating mistakes.
No, but it's just funny to me, like, this guy is like, oh, I'm so into VR and virtual reality. He has no idea. He's never heard of the imagination station, even though he's teaching in Odyssey somehow, working with computers, and he's been mentioned by Eugene, but he isn't aware of its existence.
Maybe they were all like, this guy seems pretty sketchy. Let's just not tell him.
Yeah. So yeah, and then...
I like how the dinosaurs go to war with each other.
She's like, I thought there was a time skip, but apparently not.
Like, it takes them literally 2 minutes.
I thought it was like,
I thought it was
going to be like, oh, we've gone thousands of years into the future and they progressed into like 2 different warring societies. And it's like, no, it's been a couple hours.
I thought there was genuinely a time skip until this moment. So the fact that there wasn't a time skip is kind of worrying.
So yeah, Renee's like, I have to reset the program and electrocute myself. Sorry, Whit, I know you're not clearly building any kind of allegory out of this here, but I don't know. I just feel like I need to die for the sins of my Sims here.
Can you imagine if this is what happened to every single person who's ever played Sims?
That they end up like sticking a fork into the disc outlet in their computer and electrocuting themselves.
So different. It would have such a different ending.
I mean, I'll give the episode, it was a very creative way to recontextualize like the fall and Jesus coming as God incarnate. It did take me longer to pick up on the fact that Renee sneaking herself in by dressing as one of the Whitonians was supposed to be like Jesus coming incarnate as through human body.
Another message I sent you was, is Renee Jesus now?
And like,
which I also figured out when she was just like, I'm here as one of you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh,
yeah,
Jesus.
that was one of the things I was like, yes. And like the whole,
I was like, what a time skip, Adam and Eve to Jesus in 2 hours.
Well, to be fair, like Jesus,
the Old Testament could never.
One of the other names for Jesus is the second Adam.
I did not know that.
Yeah, the Bible
He's
talks
gonna
about
have
like
to get in line
the
with
first
Adam
the
Frankenstein.
first Adam came like to, you know, and ushered in the fall of mankind, and the second Adam will come to reverse that and save mankind. Um, yeah, Jesus coming and like God's whole reasoning behind why the garden was set up the way it does and stuff, all explaining it in a way that's understandable to kids. And there, I mean, there's plenty of adults out there who like don't. I see people ask that question a lot, like, why would God even put the tree in the garden? Why even like put a tree there and be like, don't touch it because I said so? And I think this episode does a good way of kind of like showing why that happened the way that it did and why it does actually make sense.
I will say this episode had a lot of stupid in it, had a lot of stupid stuff, but it did make me think about lots of these things in a way I never have before.
It's good.
So I think that there's a lot of merit in that.
Yeah, I was impressed by the way that they did it. I thought it was because it's a topic that can be understood but isn't understood by a lot of people, and they did a good job of contextualizing it in a way that you can clearly tell, oh, this is what it's trying to represent, but still showing it in a way that you can look at it and be like, oh, now I look at it in a new light, now I understand it.
I think like in terms of teaching, it's good. In terms of plot and character actions, it is ridiculous.
Okay, so coming back to that, and speaking
Like
of the Wi-Fi,
the teacher, I was listening to the teacher. I was like, this guy's so clearly evil, and he's just doing all this. And then he was just like, oh, and by the way, I want to steal the imagination station. I was like, of course you do.
um, so on the note of the technology, I'm a little curious about how the world of this program is instanced, because maybe I'll figure out more when I listen to it a second time, but it sounded like Astan and Renee were accessing the same instance of the world, and he was accessing it from the portable imagination station at the college, and she was accessing it from the main imagination station separately and via the network and the cloud without lag, connecting in the same instance of the world, which is a very impressive step for the imagination station. But I'm also confused because Whit said he cut off the internet to the portable station. So how is Aston interacting in the same environment that Renee was in? And also, and like, how did he get to Whit's End as soon as the thing crashed in order to help pull her out of the station after she died for everyone's sins? And also, like, why didn't he like die after Renee fried the program while he was still inside of it?
I don't know.
I don't know. The video.
I just stopped picking up on everything basically near the end.
The video doc is about like the creative process that goes into writing an episode from initial concept and onwards. Most of it was the stuff that we've seen a million bajillion times. They put a little more focus, just a little bit, on like the creative process and like how it goes from like idea to outline to scripting and like fleshing out the dialogue and stuff like that. Not just the recording and post-production and Foley part and stuff, but that is also in there. When they're talking about like, here's where we like tear our ideas apart and I'll listen to it so we can like critique them. And literally, as he said that, I was trying to picture in my mind the conversation they were having when someone's like, well, Renee can use the part of the imagination station that disguises you like you're supposed to be there. And they're like, no, because on an extremely technical note, it's possibly possible that she wouldn't be able to access that. A better idea is that Whit has a holographic disguise machine that can make you look like a different species in real life.
You know, as you do.
Yeah. So there's some dude that talks about like obedience and trusting God and stuff. So I also figured out after they're talking about the name of like Aston Lieberness, they also just mentioned the names that like Connie and Eugene's names were Andras and Kyria. And once I saw it written out, I was like, yes, because I had that moment once I realized his name was Aston. I was like, are their names anagrams for Adam and Eve? No, definitely not, like, obviously. But then once I saw it written out, I was like, oh.
One of them's apple chewer and the other one's animal namer.
I was like, oh, Andras and Kyria, which is Greek for man and woman. Or man and lady. Yeah, so basically they just took Adam and Eve and changed it from Hebrew into Greek. So all of the names were extremely on the nose.
Wait, does Adam mean man?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know.
Adam. Well, actually, it means human, not male man.
Mailman.
Yeah, not Wooten.
Adam was
Yeah,
the
no.
world's first mailman.
Adam is not a gendered man, because we don't. Fortunately, Hebrew doesn't have the confusion of having the word for man be both gender specific and gender neutral.
What about Eve?
Eve, I don't. It isn't woman. I don't remember what her name means. But yeah, Adam just means human.
Adam means bro.
I typed in what
Eve
does,
means
and the
bro.
first autocomplete was what does simp mean? What does the name Eve mean?
To be fair, I looked that up once, so I'm contributing to the problem.
It means living. Yeah. The traditional meaning of Eve is
Simp
living.
or Adam?
Derived from the Latin name Eva, in turn originating with the Hebrew cheva or hava, to breathe or to give life.
Hava.
Yeah.
Nice day.
Cheva. Yeah, it means to breathe or to give life. So these names are actually even more on the nose than the Bible names.
I both like and don't like how every single time Renee learns a lesson, Whit, Renee's like, oh, so it's about God, and Whit's like, how do you feel? And she's like, oh, I don't know.
I like
on
it
one hand,
personally.
it's
It feels more
relatable.
she makes her feel more like a real human being.
It feels more real, but I wish it didn't happen every single time she learned a lesson. Like, I feel like sometimes they don't need to have that exchange.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Like, you don't have to.
Yeah, no, like I'm fine with her being like, I don't know how I feel.
I see what you mean.
I don't think it should happen every time she learns a lesson.
I see what you mean. I agree with you.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought from a story perspective, it was strange. It was, I mean, I'll be honest, based on the name and the art, I had exceedingly low expectations for it. I was expecting basically the same level of hallucinogenic trip as Walter's Flying Bus.
I haven't seen the art. It's small on my phone.
It's just Whit and Renee standing in the forest where it's like the river's purple and the sky's golden, like all the colors are all like ugly saturations of inverse and stuff.
Okay. I will say,
which admittedly from a distance I didn't notice because I'm colorblind. I was just like blue water, green sky and stuff.
Story bad, characters moral
but the lesson,
good,
very good.
So that is my rank. I will give it 2 out of 5.
I'll give it.
That's pretty much just for the moral.
I'll give it a 3.3. Yeah, because I think that the moral was done well enough that it makes up for some of the lacking in the other departments, but you definitely can't overlook, and like the plot holes, like I said, in terms of how they were making the Imagination Station work.
I am very, very ready to talk about the next episode.
Okay, so let's stop our recordings then, so we can talk about Icky and Cat and Balty and Bone. So episode 871, Icky and Cat and Balty and Bones, written by Phil Lawler. A Dave Arnold content warning. This is going to be such an intense and scary episode. I can't wait for what high stakes we have in store for us. Victoria, what happens in this episode?
I was thinking about it. I don't blame him for doing a content warning.
I mean, I was like, at the end, I was like, I guess.
But I will say,
I wasn't expecting
that villain song, low key, did not quite slap, but slapped harder than I thought it would.
Comparatively, sure.
Like, comparatively, that was the only song I kind of got into. The other one, I didn't think any songs were bad. That one, there's one long scene where Ichabod is eating.
Yes.
And it went on for 10 years.
Yes, you're correct.
And it was awful to listen to with my ear holes.
But you know what was good to listen to was Buck crooning and singing. It was very
beautiful baby boy. Also, he called himself Boy at one point. He was like, but I'm your boy. I was like, yes, you are.
Hey, I'm just a little birthday boy. I'm a little boy. You're not going to beat up me. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had such cognitive whiplash from an episode as hearing like an executive producer content warning followed immediately by the announcement that this is going to be a musical episode.
So I really wish I didn't I always see like the episode descriptions for like a second whenever I click on an episode
Same,
on
yeah, I
Odyssey.
saw
And I
it
wish
a
that didn't
while
happen to
ago.
me because I saw before it started
Yeah.
that it was going to be Sleepy Hollow.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's talk about it. So, description is it's basically Sleepy Hollow, but with Will Ryan's like music group singing it and Shona.
Yep.
Yep. And so it has like Jules and Buck, and honestly, we will get to it in a minute. We will shoot that elephant in the room when it comes to Eugene in this episode.
Well, are you going to talk about like the in-narrative conceit of the episode?
I just want to say, before Ichabod ever got voiced, I knew it was going to be Eugene because I honestly could not imagine.
Who else would it be?
I couldn't imagine anyone
Crane.
voicing Ichabod Crane who wasn't Will Ryan in this.
Yeah, I mean, just look in my mind. I picture like the Disney version of him, and I'm like, who else could possibly voice him?
Yeah. So, I still think it's so weird you haven't seen the Disney version. Also,
I've seen bits of it.
did look it up just so I could say if anyone has Disney Plus, Sleepy Hollow is on Disney Plus. It's under the Tales of Ichabod Crane and Mr. Toad. So 2 shorts that are about half an hour long each that you can watch. Last time I saw Sleepy Hollow, the Disney version, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago on Halloween. I was hanging out with Kristen and Gabe and we watched it. We also watched Moulin Rouge, which was fun. So the tale of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow is an old kind of folk story, or at least it's written like.
Are you going to set up the conceit of the episode before we start talking about the actual story?
So this is a musical episode. Basically, they're just putting on a musical version of Sleepy Hollow to try and illustrate.
Odyssey is having a folk festival.
It's happening at Tom's Barn.
Yeah, and so Whit and Wilson are hosting like a small around the campfire folk storytelling musical.
Also, I almost said this in the book review, but I didn't. They made a point to say in the Young Whit book that we just reviewed last episode that Wilson is a good singer, and listening to this, I can say they are indeed right. He has a very nice singing voice. I thought he was actually one of the better singers in this episode out of the men. He also was the one, I believe, who sang the villain song, but I could be wrong.
You could be correct. I don't remember if it was
Greg. I mean, it didn't sound like anyone else.
Gregory Jabara, yeah. I was trying to figure out who it was.
So, also, like, he gave an evil laugh at the end of that, and I was just like, Wilson's evil laugh is something I did, in fact, need to hear very badly. Thank you for giving me that.
This is actually what he sounded like when he was 11 as well.
No, yeah, exactly. That's what I want to think.
Whit's like, something's off about this kid. And I say that having seen like this weird ghost child following me around everywhere, so that's a strong statement.
So the story of Sleepy Hollow is there's this guy named Ichabod Crane who just moves into this town. There's a section of the town
it's written by
in
Washington
a valley.
Irving.
Yeah. There's a section of this area. It's a little valley, and it's called Sleepy Hollow. And so there's like a lot of superstition around there. They have quite a few legends.
I visited.
One where there's like a creepy old ghost lady, one with a creepy ghost girl, and the most popular one is the Headless Horseman.
I visited Sleepy Hollow several times in Assassin's Creed 3. And
so you're saying real life, and I was going to be so mad that you didn't take me with you.
I've never been that far east.
I know, I was confused.
Yeah, I knew you were confused because you cut me off. In Assassin's Creed 3, I was there not in Assassin's Creed, it was Assassin's Creed 4. Several times I crossed over that iconic covered bridge that is like Sleepy Hollow imagery.
I knew that it was a real place because Lindsay Ellis has been there in one of her videos. One of her like really old videos when she was still a nostalgia chick. So the main players are Ichabod Crane, Brahms, and Katrina, and kind of Katrina's dad. So Ichabod Crane is a school teacher, and he's like really popular with everyone in town. He eats a lot, and he looks like a
He looks
sad,
like
scrawny
Eugene.
little bone man, with like a huge nose.
Gavin.
And just look at like the Disney version of him because that's very, very accurate to how he's described. Actually, look at the Disney versions of all the characters. The Disney version is like very, very accurate. I will get back to that. So, Ichabod Crane wants to romance Katrina because her father's very wealthy and she's like really hot and stuff and nice. And Katrina likes Brahms in this version. And so Brahms is kind of like a prankster. He doesn't want Ichabod to be with Katrina, so Brahms starts pulling pranks on Ichabod. And it doesn't really dissuade Ichabod or anything. Yeah?
Because you know the story infinitely better than I do, and you also knew, like I did, that it was going to be Sleepy Hollow before it started. Before they started telling the story and using people's names, did you realize that the title was like abbreviations of their names?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you?
Well, no, because especially like, because two of the names, like Icky and Bones, are like words, and Balty
Well,
and
like the
Cat are like
second they started,
kind of close to name.
I
Yeah,
thought about
so
the title when I saw Sleepy Hollow. I was like, oh, Icky, Ichabod.
yeah, I thought that it was like, I don't know, some kind of like rhyme refrain that was going to kind of be like used as like nonsense words, kind of like in like a rhyme they would be used talking about it, or that they would like tell it through some, when they tell stories, but like from the perspective of like these mice who are watching it happen or something like that. And it would be like the names of like these side characters that they surrogated into Ichabod Crane's world or something like that. I wasn't exactly sure what it would be, but as soon as they're like, there was this guy and his name was Icky, and I was like, oh, Ichabod, and these are all their names shortened. And now I get it.
Mm-hmm. So the only name I didn't understand about the abbreviations was Bones.
It was his
because
last name, they said.
Brahms.
Brahms Bones.
It's not his last name.
Okay, I don't know
It's
then.
a nickname that people call him by. Brahms Bones.
In the actual story or in this episode?
In the actual story.
Okay.
I will get back to that too. So, like I said before, haven't read Sleepy Hollow. I've only ever seen a YouTube web series of it, which I've watched several times because I really enjoyed it, which is animated. And I've seen the Disney one a couple times.
And I've only seen that web series because Victoria showed it to me. I should
Yeah.
also point out,
And Devin's never seen like any other version
I
of
wrote
it.
so little about this episode that we've already more than covered over everything I wrote about it.
Oh, okay, good to know. We're only 10 minutes in, but good
I know.
to know.
I have a couple notes about the web
And
quest,
so-
but that's all I wrote about the actual episode.
Okay, so Brahms starts realizing that, like, basically Ichabod is going to marry Katrina. He gets, like, the approval, and then they're at, like, their engagement party, and then Brahms starts telling, like, a ghost story about the Headless Horseman. And then Ichabod goes out, and then the Headless Horseman comes up, and then scares Ichabod out of town, and he, like, moves away. They don't say where he moves away to, and then Brahm is like, oh yeah, that was me, Katerina, like, we can be together now. And she's just like, get out of my face, you're basically as bad as he is. And at the beginning of this episode, since they were giving Katrina so much screen time, I can't think of a better word than screen time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Since they were giving her so much, like, time in the episode and Brahms hadn't actually shown up yet, I was thinking, okay, either Brahms is going to have a small part maybe, or Katrina is going to be the Headless Horseman in this version. And she's going to be the one who's just like, I do not want to be with you, leave.
I will take my own agency.
Yeah, and I was like, thinking, like, if that doesn't happen, I need there to be a version, like, where it retells the story and she's the Headless Horseman, because I would be really into that. Also, the Johnny Depp Headless Horseman, Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Christopher Walken plays the headless horseman, and his teeth are just literal spikes, like shark teeth, and he just goes ah all the time, and that's the only noise he makes for the whole movie. No, not like that. He's just screaming at all times, and it's amazing. At one point, he like kisses Katrina's mom, and he bites her lips when he kisses her, and then he just takes his mouth away from her. And
Wait,
then
does he have an upper jaw?
no, he like sometimes has his head on in the movie and sometimes
Oh,
doesn't.
okay. I thought it was just like
No.
lower jaw spikes and nothing above that.
And so then he just like he like rips her away from him, and he's just like, rah! And he's like blood all over his face, and it's so stupid. Oh, it's so stupid. It's so funny. I tried watching that movie last year, and I could not get very far into it. I was super bored. So then Katrina tells Brahms to like go. She breaks up with him. And then Wilson's just like, so we retold the ending. We think our ending's better than the original ending. And I was listening to that and I was just like, you're right. But, So I finished the episode and then I looked at the time and I thought, I have about half an hour to an hour. So then I ran inside.
It was a long episode. While I was listening to it and I looked at it.
33 minutes.
Yeah.
Bought The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Read the entire thing. So I have some things to say. The Disney adaptation is definitely the most accurate version of it. There's probably going to be. But, that being said, this version was actually very accurate. I was pretty impressed.
Especially given that they explicitly talked about changing the story.
I mean, they did definitely change the ending, but some notes I have in my brain. So their description of Ichabod and all the other characters is basically lifted from the book, especially them calling him a scarecrow. Like, specifically, he's called a scarecrow a couple times in the book. There were, like, a bunch of little bits. Like, I couldn't remember Brahms, like, really pranking Ichabod. I know that there was, like, one point where he gets, like, a dog to, like, howl while Ichabod's, like, doing something in the Disney version, which there is a line about that, how Ichabod, even though he's, like, very superstitious, he also, like, reads the Psalms to the kids at school and stuff, and he was, like, teaching Katrina about them. And Brahms specifically trained a dog, so every time Brahms and the dog are nearby Ichabod, when he starts singing psalms, the dog starts howling. And I was just like, I'm so impressed. The dedication, the talent.
I thought you were going to say every time, like,
it
heard Ichabod say, like, a specific phrase from the Psalms, like, hallelujah, or praise the Lord, or something like that.
But I was just like, the fact that the dog, like, specifically knows when he's doing psalms and he just starts howling is the funniest thing to me.
It is incredible dedication.
Yeah, I was just like, man, I really respect Brahms.
Yeah, he had an incredible career in, like, animal training.
Yeah. So, like, Katrina, I know from just general things I knew going into the episodes where I was like, I don't know how accurate that is. So Brahms and Katrina being a couple, they're not technically a couple in the original, but he is, like, the number one contender for actually getting her hand, basically. And since, like, he's so revered in town and has, like, all these, like, cronies and stuff, no one actually wants to, like, go against him.
He's the Gaston, but not as awful.
Pretty much. Yeah. And trying to think of other things. There's so many descriptions of the food in this short story. Basically,
Irving was just as hungry as Ichabod was.
This short story is only 36 pages, so it didn't take me very long to read.
Well, I was like, clearly not, because you read it between finishing the episode and recording.
Well, I read it in, like, half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I had to do stuff by 2, and I finished this episode a little bit before 1. So, what else? This episode is framed kind of like Phantom of the Opera's book is, where it's like a guy learned about this story, and now he's like telling it. And he's like, and watch out. Um, I've always heard that it's not 100% confirmed that Ichabod actually survived the story,
Mm-hmm.
but in this version that I read, they make it like pretty clear that he's alive because like the guy who's narrating and like writing down the whole story, he's like, oh yeah, and I actually saw Ichabod. He moved to New York. He became a politician, and he was so popular he got elected and stuff. And
So this was in the version you showed me and I forgot about it. I didn't realize that the Headless Horseman was like just a prank and that it wasn't supposed to be like an actual ghost chasing him.
The version I showed you, I love it so much. So I kind of explained this to you when we watched it, but the problem was you didn't really know the original story, so
Yes.
it didn't really have an impact on you. So it's not explicitly stated in the original that Brahm is the Headless Horseman.
Okay.
But basically, there's like a party at a barn. It's not like an engagement party or anything. It's just like a party at a barn that everyone's at.
Vague memories, yes.
And so that's not in the web story.
Okay.
But,
I said vague.
well, I mean, it's in the episode, kind of. But so they're all there, and then they're all telling ghost stories and stuff. It actually like quickly mentions a bunch of other ghost stories, and that Ichabod Crane doesn't actually like really know ghost stories, and they scare him. So he just talks about like general folksy stories from the area he moved from. And then Brahms, because he like knows that Ichabod's superstitious, is just like, oh yeah, and there's the Headless Horseman, and there's like this creek in town where this guy was like riding his horse over the bridge, and then the Headless Horseman just like came out of nowhere and like threw the guy in the creek and stuff, and the guy was never seen again. And Brahms was like, one time I was riding, and then the Headless Horseman like came up to me, and he was like gonna steal my soul or whatever, but he goes all like devil went down to Georgia on it. And he's just like, so I like challenged him to a horse racing contest, and me and him were like neck and neck, but then I got close to like the old church, and then the Headless Horseman just like left because he can't go near it. So that's why Ichabod's like heading in a specific direction over the bridge. He's like trying to get to the church because Brahm said that like
you'll be safe there, yeah.
Leave. Yeah. And so it's kind of funny during the actual chase because they're like really, really close and they're going over the bridge, and Ichabod's like, I'm gonna make it. And all of a sudden his horse goes 90 degrees and just starts going in the other direction.
It's like a Tron bike. Wait,
down,
180 or 90?
Like 90 degrees. And then the horse just starts going down like a really steep embankment, and then Ichabod's just like, okay, bad.
His horse is a light cycle.
We're just going down this way, but also there's no way the Headless Horseman expected that, so I'm safe now. And then he turns around, the Headless Horseman's like right there, and he's like, frick.
He'll never figure it out. He doesn't have any eyes.
I couldn't find any bit that said like the head was a pumpkin at all.
Yeah, I think that's story. Just like...
But it did mention a broken pumpkin at the very end of the short story. So I don't know if
maybe that's where people
something.
Put it together. I mean, I feel like it's one of those things that Disney put out there, or maybe it was like engravings or something.
And you know what it was? Brahms probably, if it was him, which I'm pretty sure it was,
put the pumpkin on his head.
He had like a pumpkin, and then he was holding it, and Ichabod just thought it was like a real head. Because the way he describes it in the story, he makes it sound like it is actually a real head, and not like a pumpkin. But it was probably just him being freaked out. So basically what happens is, in the little flash forward they have at the end, where it's just like, yeah, Ichabod goes, and then it's just like, and if you happen to mention this story to Brahms, you'll see him laughing his head off in the corner, so he probably had something to do with it. Especially when you mention, like, Ichabod being involved and stuff, so...
Very subtle storytelling.
Yeah. So basically is pretty explicit about the fact that it's
Yeah.
Brahm, but not quite. The web series, what I really liked about it is that they kind of make it look like it's Brahm. And so, like, anyone who actually knows the story is going to be like, oh, yeah, it's Brahm.
But
And
you
then it
wouldn't
just
realize
cuts
it
to
most of the time.
Brahm's house. And then the headless horseman runs in, and Brahm's, like, in a towel because he just got out of the shower. And he was just like, oh my gosh, a monster. And then Brahm starts using karate to, like, fight the headless horseman. I remember watching it the first time, and I was like, this is amazing. And I was so happy. But yeah, I love that series so much. It's so much fun.
So the video documentary, it's focused on these two kids. I don't actually know who they are or how they're connected to the club, but they're working on their High School Musical, and kind of like
We're all in this.
high school musicals are like the focus of the video mostly. It's an impressive production, it looks like, because most of their numbers are like tap choreographed, and they're like, we also have some
Nice.
soft shoe numbers. I was like, what kind of High School Musical is this? But the most interesting thing that I learned, the most interesting about this whole thing for me was like from the web quest, and it was talking about the Washington Irving and kind of his history. So the first book that he wrote, because he had a whole slew of different pen names that he wrote under, and the first one that he wrote it under the name like something Knickerbocker. And what he
That
did,
sounds familiar.
what he did was he started printing these like fake like ads or editorials or whatever in the newspaper, and he like wrote a thing as the like manager of a hotel who is saying like, hey, Daniel Knickerbocker, you need to come back here and pay your bill for your hotel room because you didn't, and if you don't come back in time, then I'm going to publish this manuscript that you left behind when you like left your room without paying. And then it like stirred up like all this publicity around it, and then published the book. And then like so he kind of made this whole like big publicity hoax stunt kind of thing, and the name Knickerbocker caught on there in New York, and that is the reason that New York's NBA team is called the New York Knicks, is they're named after Knickerbocker as popularized by Washington Irving. And then not only did he do that, but he also wrote a series of articles in like 1805 that was like poking fun at New York, and he nicknamed New York with this Old English pejorative term that means goat's town, and the word that he used is Gotham. And then over 100 years later, some writers at Detective Comics were looking at that, and they were like, hey, that's a catchy name for New York. This new Bruce Wayne character, he's going to be from Gotham. So
that explains why Gotham's so big.
Both the New York Knicks and Gotham City are like side branches off of Washington Irving's writings, which I thought was very interesting, especially because he wrote those articles about New York being Gotham in 1805, which was like 120 years before Batman began, maybe more.
But not before Batman begins.
It's true.
There's an Ono Lit class episode on the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, so I actually have heard all those things before. So that's why it's
all of those
familiar
things
to me. Yes.
I thought
RJ and Megan are very well researched.
Darn it!
Actually, that's just I think RJ who's in charge of all that research.
I was excited to have you learn something about classic American literature authors.
I'm sorry, dude. I already knew.
One day you'll learn something about literature from me.
You trying to educate me in my own habitat.
Yeah, I know.
Me, like Ron Swanson, I know more than you.
It's true.
Department store.
As I've said in every episode that is an adaptation of like a classic story, I'm so glad that you know all of this stuff because of how much I don't know about all of these things, and that we have all of your...
this is how we cover our bases.
Hyper detailed critiques of like literature adaptation fidelity.
Yeah. Like, you didn't read Legend of Sleepy Hollow after listening to this episode.
Yeah, I wouldn't have. I would have looked at it and seen those 36 pages and been like...
Are you serious?
Yeah. I was so tired today. I fell asleep like 6 times after I woke up.
Boo. But... yeah, I was like, I've always wanted to read this story. How long is it? And I looked on Goodreads, and the version I looked at, I guess, had like different essays in front of it or something, because it said 105 pages. And then I looked at my watch, and I was just like, I should have enough time to read that before we record. And then I bought the Kindle version. It said 36 pages, and I was like, oh, boo. And then I read it in half an hour.
See, the problem is I probably just would have been too bored to, like, keep reading through it without reading the same paragraph over and over.
What I did was I opened Spotify and I typed in spooky atmospheric music, and then I was listening to The Chase, and I actually got goosebumps a couple times because it sounded like there were ripping noises in my ears of like cloth and stuff, and I was like, ooh, that's spooky. But the real story did not scare me at all. But yeah.
So what do you give the episode, oh master of knowledge?
Well, young Padawan, I give it a... I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Also, we haven't talked about the whole love triangle
Yes.
thing yet. We kind of did in the last episode, but that's not this one.
Yes.
Before that, what do you give it? I thought there weren't, unlike the one where like Tom's Farm is reintroduced. I don't
Legacy.
remember what that is. Yeah. There were songs in that one I just straight up did not like, and same thing with like the other one they did. There was another one, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. But like there weren't any songs I disliked in this one. There were just songs I thought were like,
it was the live show. That's what it was.
Yeah, that's it.
When there
were songs
when they're like, we're going to take
like,
over the airwaves.
Reuse the worst song from Legacy in the live show.
They used most of them again, right? They were almost all like
I think so.
Yeah. They just reskinned them.
It was like the Stinky
Pete.
That's
Stinky
a character
Mal, whatever.
from
Malgeist.
Toy Story.
Yeah.
Anyway, I actually did kind of like the villain song. I thought the lyrics were a little simplistic.
The Bucks one,
very
or
repetitive. It was pretty much the same words over and over again. But that laugh, though, at the end,
okay, you're talking
Wilson
about the
gave, and he also did a good performance.
Yeah.
So it was catchy enough. It was very short though.
I liked hearing Buck sing, even though the lyrics were like pranksta gangsta.
It was nice hearing him sing. There was like one moment where Shona's accent, actually a couple, where her accent and Buck's accents slipped, but in the opposite way, where one's trying to sound country who isn't country, and one is country and is not trying to sound like it. But that's fine. Especially since they're playing characters in this, so it's kind of cute if their accents slip, because you're like, hey, it's the character playing a character.
Yeah, so the love triangle thing was weird, because
the love triangle thing was very weird, because you have Eugene trying to romance his son's
girlfriend, question mark,
and the other love interest, like, and she's trying to just have a relationship with Eugene's son, and I was so uncomfortable. And then at one point Eugene said like, oh, I can't wait to marry Katrina or something like that, and I was just like, that both gave me flashbacks and made me even more uncomfortable at the same time, because Eugene, and also it was the scene where like Ichabod was eating, and it just went on for so long.
And you had flashbacks to the animated series.
And I didn't actually, but I am now. Him inhaling apples like he's an anaconda.
Yeah.
Actually, they did...
His anaconda does.
Ichabod is straight up described as an anaconda at one point in the story, like in the book. Like the way he eats.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that's awful. But
snake jaws are cool.
Yeah, his jaw just unhinges.
It doesn't unhinge though. That's what's so interesting. It's
it's funnier that way.
No, I know, but no. I'm saying snakes' jaws don't actually unhinge.
Snakes don't have jaws. Snakes scare me.
But it's not pseudohyastilic. I can't rember what name it is for the jaw suspension that reptiles have, but it's really interesting because it's not unhinging, but it's that like their stylic jaw suspension allows it basically to like unfold in a way that allows it to like expand.
Don't.
In
you know
diameter.
what confuses me?
It's very
I
cool.
hate snakes,
And they're
and
not
snakes are one of
connected
my
at the
least
middle.
favorite things. But two series I really like. My favorite characters are snakes in both of them. Like they're people who can turn into snakes or half
Good
snakes or something
Omens,
like that. Good Omens and Sandersides.
Pattern, or
And
Deceit.
also, it's yeah, Janice, Deceit. So also, I really like long neck turtles, and they're basically just if you glue a snake to a turtle, and long neck turtles are like adorable in my opinion, but they look like snakes, so I don't know what my deal is. Anyway, uh, so what's up with Eugene romance and Shona?
I don't know.
So
It would have been much
uncomfortable.
less weird if they cast Connie as Katrina, at
It
least.
would. It would.
But that, I mean, obviously they wanted Shona in there to sing with her sisters.
Yeah, and like I said before, I couldn't imagine anyone else voicing Ichabod.
Yeah. So, like, I get it, but
I
also
get it, but that doesn't mean I have to like it.
it gets it. But I get it, but doesn't mean I have to like it or accept it.
Yeah. Um, Also, I was thinking of like how well the conversation with Katrina's dad and Ichabod went, and I was just like, man, I wish it was this easy with Armitage.
I know. I was like, are they going to bring back Armitage's voice actor? Because clearly Katrina will
That
be
would have been
Katrina. I was like, that
something.
would be very weird.
We reanimated his body and stole his vocal cords like we're Victor
Well, because I'm
Frankenstein.
like, they technically don't have to confirm that it is Armitage speaking, but it's just like when they did Harlow Doyle's, or, when they did David Harley's voice in Kids Radio without, like, technically making it, like, canon that he came back to Odyssey to do the voice
No, it'd be
when he
like
was, like,
that
Marley.
other Danny Gonzalez vine because I apparently can't quote any vines from
Uh-huh.
anyone else, where he's like in the clothes rack at the mall. And he's like, "Dad, is that you?" And the dad smiles. He's like, "Where have you been for the last 10 years?" And he sucks out. And he's like, "Dad, no." That'd just be Eugene and Armitage in this episode. Something that did confuse me is there's like writing at the end because this is all like the story opens and it's just like, oh, this story was found in this guy's papers. So at the very end,
It's kind of
found in
like
the
Princess Bride.
handwriting, a little bit, found in the handwriting of Mr. Knickerbocker. The preceding tale I give is given almost in the precise words in which I heard it in related to corporation meeting at the ancient city of Manhattanus. Manhattos. Okay. At which were present many of the sagest and most illustrious burglars. I don't think that's
Sageasis?
how you spell burglars. The narrator was a pleasant, shabby, gentlemanly old fellow in pepper and salt clothes with a sadly humorous face,
That's a
and one
weird way to
whom
say salt and pepper.
I strongly suspected of being poor. It's so mean.
He's
He
looking
made
at him like Sherlock Holmes deducing. Are
the
you
guy
perchance
only has
poor?
one shoe on, one sock with holes in it. He like has a hat with like the top punched out and like fingerless gloves.
His
He's like,
pockets
I
are
have a
turned out.
strong suspicion he might be poor.
The science of deduction indeed.
He made such efforts to be entertaining. Oh yeah, there was also some racist bits in this, so I'm really glad that
What?
Odyssey cut them out. And also, I'm pretty sure they aren't in the Disney version. So like,
Well, that's
good on
good.
you, Disney. You did it once.
Did you see that movie that
So
Jenny was tweeting about like 2 days ago?
no,
Some old.
tell me after.
Yeah.
Uh, there was like a couple really cringy racist bits. There were three racist parts.
We don't have to detail them. We don't need
Yeah.
to
Anyway, I'll tell you after.
depress ourselves with them.
Yeah.
Okay, so you gave it 4 to 5. I'm going to give
Wait.
it.
Okay, when his story concluded, there was much laughter and approbation, particularly from 2 or 3 deputy aldermen, blah, 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 blah. The storyteller, who was putting a glass of wine to his lips as a refreshment after his toils, paused for a moment. He looked at his inquirer with an air of infinite duress. and lowering the glass slowly to the table, observed that the story was indeed intended most logically to prove. So he straight up puts 4 optional morals, which you can pick at the end. Like, it's a choose your own adventure, which you want to take from the story. And I was like, what am I supposed to glean from this? So the first one is that there is no situation in life that has its advantages and pleasures, provided we will but take a joke as we find it. So I guess the lesson was Ichabod should have laughed off being scared almost to death and just not moved away to New York, maybe. The next one, moral B.
The moral was, it's just a prank, bro.
Yeah, pretty much. Moral B, that therefore he that runs races with goblin troopers is likely to have a rough riding of it. So
is that supposed to be aimed at
That's supposed
Brahms?
to be the Headless Horseman, which I guess is Brahms. So it's just like, if you're gonna race evil people, watch out, because it's not gonna be easy. Which, that's the
Well, I thought maybe it meant like
weird moral.
It was decrying Brahms, like, hey, if you're going to, sink to like unsavory means to stop a bad person,
I mean,
like Ichabod.
Goblin Rider was literally a nickname for the Headless Horseman.
Never
In
mind.
the story. So
Never mind.
I didn't mention that before. He's called a goblin at one point. I was like, is he a goblin or a man?
I love that song from the Muppet movie.
Am I a goblin or am I a man?
Is he a goblin? If he is, he's a goblin of a man.
He's a very gobby man. Anyway, so ergo, for a country schoolmaster to be refused the hand of a Dutch heiress is a certain step to high preferment in the state. I don't even understand that.
Wait, read that again?
Ergo, for a country schoolmaster to be refused the hand of a Dutch heiress is a certain step to high preferment in the state.
So, like, it was good for him to
I guess.
Wait,
like,
did it say for him to refuse her or her to refuse him?
Ichabod to be refused the hand of Katrina, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Is a certain step to high preferment in the state. I don't get it.
That's okay.
This one did actually make sense to me. I thought this was actually a good way to end the story. The cautious old gentleman knit his brows tenfold closer after this explanation, being sorely puzzled by their
he was already like this, and then his eyebrows are
of
just
the
like
syllogism.
smashed together.
Yeah, the guy's listening to this. He's like, those morals make no sense, which was my reaction because I had to reread these like 5 times because I was like, what did you just say? And the narrator has the same reaction.
So the rest of the story,
nice.
I take it, is not nearly this kind of verbosely dense as these morals.
Not as those specific moral sentences.
Okay.
But the rest of it, I mean, it's as dense as basically any other classical book I've had to read in English. So
well, yeah, but
no
I can say, like, those
me.
sentences, I don't think I would have gotten through in half an hour, 36 pages of that.
No. So, blah, blah, blah. Well, methought the one in pepper and salt eyed him with something of a triumphant leer. At length he observed that all this was very well, but still he thought the story was a little on the extravagant. There were 1 or 2 points on which he had his doubts. Faith, sir, replied the storyteller, as to the matter, I don't believe one half of it myself. DK. And I was like, okay, that's...
Donkey Kong?
That's a good way to end the story, just by being like, you gotta take some things, not other things, and yeah.
Alright, I am going to give it 3.5 out of 5. I guess I didn't have as much appreciation for the original story, and I was like, it felt kind of weird to do something that's like borderline, not in my opinion, content warning needed, but also as like a musical and stuff. And I just thought it was like kind of strange and stuff, and kind of making all the characters into like these 4 deadly sin caricature kind of.
Oh,
things.
Also the Headless Horseman was like a Hessian soldier.
Yes, I know.
Canonically in the original story.
Yes.
That's not just something they added for the episode.
I don't even remember where Hessians
That also
were from.
plays heavily into the TV show, which I did watch the first episode.
Yeah. Well, I knew that I knew from playing Assassin's Creed 3 that like the British Army like hired Hessian soldiers as like kind of a
I
mercenary
don't
military
know what a
force.
Hessian is.
They're from somewhere in Europe, and I don't remember
Wow,
where.
that's a specific.
Yeah. They were basically there was like an army of like these highly trained soldiers, I want to say from somewhere in like Eastern Europe or something like that, and they basically just acted as like a private militia for hire, and so Britain hired them to be like this super like high-end paramilitary force to come in and help them fight America, I believe.
So this is like the American Revolution.
Well, it's after that, right? Because they said like the Hessian was there then and died, and then that was the beginning of the legend, was like during the Revolutionary War. So this is like this would have been written like 30 years after that or so, 30, 40 years after the revolution.
Okay.
So we're like early 1800s America.
So like Jefferson?
About Jefferson.
Okay.
So pretty close to it, but after the revolution.
I can name like 4 presidents. I get my level.
I would hope you could name at least more than that, because there's like the two
All
really
my
old.
brain space.
I'm just saying, there's like the
is
two really
for
famous old
English
ones. You named another
lessons.
old one, and I hope you could name the current and previous one. So at least that, hopefully.
No, I can't.
I erased it from my memory, just didn't want to think about it.
I can't read.
Suddenly, sorry, I can't read.
This sign won't stop me because I can't read.
Yeah. Okay.
That's me going into a content warning episode of Odyssey when I'm a little kid and then being scarred by Novacom.
Okay, so thank you for joining us on our side of the YouTube. I've been Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Melsner. Next time, we're going to be finishing off the 2019 AIOC year with The Morning Star and Lifted Out of Context, and I guess also, reviewing the whole year then. And then we can start diving into the last season that we haven't talked about yet.
And I'm the one who reads.
Yeah.
Except for when she doesn't.
Thank you. All that blather. Goodbye.
Bye.